Previous exercise, we constructed a model of a workbench with a worker standing facing it. In the next exercise, we're going to construct a model of a shop that has multiple workstations in it, separated by a conveyor. The workshop is going to be 18 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 6 meters high. It's going to have a 4x4 door centered in one end of it. It's going to have a conveyor going down the center of it that is 12 meters long, 0.9 meters high, and 0.75 meters high. The top of the conveyor is going to be covered with rollers that are 5 centimeters in diameter and spaced 10 centimeters apart. There'll be 4 benches on each side of the conveyor separated by 3 meters, and there will be small or female workers with a 5 percentile stature and average length proportions at each bench. And on the left side we'll have 95 percentile males, or workers with 95 percentile male stature and average proportions. So with that, let's open a new layer, and we'll go ahead and get started with our shop. The first thing I'm going to do is use the units command and make sure I'm working in centimeters, because I'll be importing some benches from another drawing and I want to make sure we're consistent, so I'll change this to centimeters. I'm going to change my precision down to the nearest millimeter, which will be 0.0, and that should take care of my dimensions. I'm already have the 3D menu displayed here, so I don't have to worry about that. But if you don't have that, you can just come down here to the lower right where you see this little gear shaped object. Right click on it and go to 3D modeling, but we don't have to worry about that. And then I like to start out in an ISO view, and I come up here to standard view. I like the southeast isometric view, which gives me the x-axis kind of running down to the right and the y-axis going up to the left. I'll kind of move this over a little bit so I got more drawing space, and I'll stay in this positive XY quadrant. So let's go ahead and start constructing our workspace, and we'll use the rectangle tool and essentially just start anywhere. And I'll just type, well, I want 12 meters by, or I'm sorry, I want 18 meters by 10 meters, which translates to 1800 centimeters by 1000 centimeters. So there's the footprint of the inside of the building. Zoom out a little bit. I'm going to give some thickness to the walls. I'm going to make the walls 25 centimeters thick. The easiest way to do that is just to simply type your offset, or use the offset tool. It'll ask for the distance. I'll type 25 for the thickness of the wall. We'll select the wall, and I'll just pull my cursor outside of that to tell it I want a line offset 25 centimeters outside of the rectangle I just constructed. And I will just click with my mouse, and you'll see now I've got my outline of the building. I want to go ahead now and give this some height. Specification is for the walls to be 6 meters high. So I'm going to use the extrude command for that. And I can come up here and just select extrude, or I can type the command extrude either into the dynamic menu or into the command line. I'm going to then select the 2 lines that give me the inside and the outside of the walls. Make sure those are both selected. Oops, it's still trying to do offset. Let me escape out of that. You got to remember to make sure you're done with one command before you start the next one. All right, so let's try this again. I'm going to type extrude. Now I will select the inside and the outside, and I will type return to tell it I'm done selecting. I'll pull my cursor up till I want to extrude this in a vertical direction, and I'll type 600 for 6 meters. And there are my walls. Now, if you go from the wireframe view here to the realistic view, you'll notice that I'm getting a solid object. So I want to change that so I actually don't have the center of the building filled in, because I want to put my work equipment and my workers there. So what I can do is I can use a subtract command and subtract this inner box from the outer box. It'll be a little easier to do if I switch from the realistic view though back to the wireframe view so I can see the boundaries of my surfaces. And I will now type subtract. And it says specify the first object, so I'll select the outer box and I'll type return until I'm done selecting. Then I will select the inner box and I'll type return. And now if I go back and look at my realistic view or conceptual view, you can see that my box has been hollowed out. Now I got a real workspace. Next thing I want to do is put a window or a door on the end of this my building, and the specifications of the door should be 4 by 4. Now what I'm going to do this by making a rectangle and basically repeating what I just did, but if I want to work on this surface, I've got to set up a user coordinate system, so I'm drawing my objects on this surface. So towards that end, I'm going to move this up here a little bit and zoom out a little bit so I get a better view of it. And I'll come over here to my view cube. Underneath that's an object that lets me specify a new user coordinate system. I'll click on that, and I'm just going to come up here or down here to the lower corner. And it's kind of hard to click on that because I haven't specified a snap on it. So let me escape out of that for just a second. I'm going to come down here and go to my snap settings, and I'm going to tell it I want to turn my snap on, and it's set to the nearest 0.5 centimeters. So this is fine, and it'll be even more helpful if I turn on the ortho command as well. So now it'll constrain me to moving in parallel to the x and y coordinates in 0.5 centimeter increments. So let's try this again. I'll come back and tell it I want to select the user coordinate system. Now it's going to constrain me to, if I've done everything correctly, it should constrain me to 0.5 centimeter increments. Still a little hard to tell when I'm actually on that corner, so I'm going to go once back to my snap settings, and I'm going to turn on my object snap until I want to find, well, actually I'm going to take my 3D snap until I want vertices. I'm going to make sure that's turned on. Okay. Now let's try this. I'll come back to this corner, and now it snaps right in that corner. I can come across to the opposite corner or along the x direction and click that to define my x-axis and user coordinate system. And I can come up in the vertical direction to define my y-axis. Okay, so now I'm probably going to want to, well, actually, let's go ahead and see how this works. Let's get the rectangle and make an outline for my door. So now I should be able to draw on this XY plane. I'm going to start down here again in this lower corner. And I'll just come up here and tell it I want a door 4 meters by 4 meters, which is 400 centimeters by 400 centimeters. Okay, so it gave me my door. That looks pretty good. Now I want to move this to the center of the room, and I'm going to change my snap settings again. Come back to this guy and go to snap settings. I'm going to turn off my 3D snap here. I guess so I'll turn that off. I'll go back to object snap and turn that on and tell it I want it to also have snap function on the midpoint. That'll make life a little easier for me. So now let's move this door to the center, and I'm going to type the command move. I'm going to select the door. Make sure I get the door selected. It's a little hard to see, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go back to hit escape. I'm going to come back to the wireframe view. It's just easier if I can see the boundaries of my line. So let's do this again. So I'm going to go move. Okay, I'll come back and select the door. Now I can see it pretty well. I can see that I've selected it. That's great. I'll hit return until I'm done selecting. And now I should be able to, I've got midpoint specified as a snap object, so I can find the midpoint of the door. So I'll select that as the base point. I'm going to move over here till I find the midpoint of this wall, which is going to be right there. It shows a little triangle, and it says midpoint when I get there. I'll click that. So there's my door, centered in the middle of the wall. But the door is just an outline on the surface. So I'm going to use the extrude and subtract tools to go ahead and make to punch a hole in the wall, basically. So I will go to extrude again, and I will select the door outline. I'll type return, and now I can go either way. I'll just push it in, and I'll type return. So now I've got this box protruding into my building. I'm going to use the subtract command, and I'm going to select the building as the first object. I'll type return, and then I'm going to select this object that I pushed in the area of the door to subtract from it, and I'll type return, and it didn't work, so I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to use the subtract command. I'll type subtract. I will select the building as the first object, and then I'll type return, and then I'll select the second object, and there we go. Okay, so there you can see I've used the subtract tool to remove the door and make the opening. So now let's go back and go to the conceptual view and see how that looks. Great. Okay, so there's my walls with the door in it. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and make our conveyor. Now it'll probably be easier if I hide the building so it's not interfering with my conveyor. So that means I should put it in a separate layer, and I probably should have created my layers before I started, but I can still do it after the fact. So I'm going to come back up here and find the layers property and open it, and I'm going to tell it I want a new layer. I'm going to call the layer shop. Okay. So there's a layer shop, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to select everything that's in my drawing down here. Sure I got everything. Let me zoom out a little bit, and just sometimes it's best just to make a counterclockwise circle around it and make sure you got everything great. And then I'll right click on it and go to properties down here towards the bottom, and when the properties window opens, you'll see something, one of the lines here says layers. If I click on that layer line, I get a drop down, and I can choose shop, and it will move it to the layers. And while we're here, let's go back to layers, and we'll give that a distinctive color so it shows up, so I know which I'm looking at, and I'll make it a light gray. Okay, that looks good. Okay, and now I can close my properties window, and let's make a new layer for the conveyor. So I'll come up and tell I want a new layer. I'm going to call this one conveyor. 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 Okay, so there's the conveyor layer. And let's give that a distinctive color. And click on that. So we made the shop gray. So let's maybe make the conveyor a darker gray. Most conveyors I see in factories are usually kind of dark, steel gray. Okay, so now I can hide the shop. I'll just hide that. And so I'm going to make the conveyor layer active. I'm going to hide the shop. Okay, and make it a layer. And the next thing I want to do is make sure I set my coordinate system back to the world coordinate system. So let's go ahead and make our conveyor. And I'm going to just simply start out here with a get rid of the layer palette because it's hiding my controls. I'm just going to start here with a rectangle tool. Come down here. Well, I can start anywhere. Let's just start here. Come out here, and we said we're going to make it 12 meters, which is 1200 centimeters by 75, something like that. I will zoom out on it a little bit so I can see it better. Now I'm going to basically use the extrude command to extend this into 3 dimensions, but I'm going to do something slightly different because I don't want this to be just a solid object. I want this to be an empty box that I'm going to fill. And in contrast to the building itself, I'm not going to worry about the thickness of the sides of it because that's going to basically be sheet metal, and for practical purposes we'll represent that with just a line. But what I will do is I'm going to select the rectangle, and I'm going to use the command explode. And what that will do is it will separate the lines into separate objects. And then I can select all these lines together, but they're being treated as separate objects. And I'll type the command extrude. And now you can see I can just pull these up, but you'll notice it's making an open box this time as opposed to a solid box that we got when we made the factory. And I will just bring this up, and we're going to bring it up 90 centimeters. And there's my outline of my conveyor. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is put my rollers in here. So I'm going to zoom in on an upper corner here of this so I can make a rectangle. And let's come over here to my coordinate system, and let's make a new user coordinate system, and I'm going to click on the upper corner conveyor, and I'll come along here and I'll create one axis on the X direction. Okay, now I've got my object snapped on, so it doesn't want to snap on an edge. So I'm going to come back down here and shut off my object snaps. Let's go to snap settings, object snap. I'm going to shut that off, but my grid snap, I'll make sure I turn that on, and it's set for 0.5 increments. And I still have the ortho command on. I assume I've got the ortho command on, and it says yes. Okay, so let's try this again. Now I'll come along here, and now I can snap on this edge, and I can do the same thing here. I don't have to actually go all the way to the end. Okay, so there's my, oops. Now I want to make the surface XY, and I made the top of it XY, so let me undo that. We'll do this again. Tell it I want a new XY coordinate, and it's okay to make mistakes. Just make sure part of the learning to use a tool like this is to recognize when you've made a mistake. So I'll start out again. I'll put my coordinate system on that corner and come along and select a point on the edge, and then rather than on this opposite corner here, I'm going to come down this time. And apparently my X coordinate didn't click there, so I'm going to come along here and make sure I got my, doesn't matter, make sure I got my X axis defined here. Okay, it's not snapping on my X axis. Well, let's see if it'll snap, maybe come down here. Yeah, I apparently still have my, you can see that it wants to go to the end of this, so apparently I still have my object snap on. Let's go back and check that again. Snap settings. Object snap is still on. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so let's come back here. I think actually when I erased the last time, I accidentally erased the object snap command. So now I should be able to go along this line anywhere and define my x-axis, and then I can come down here and I'll put my x-axis along the vertical edge of the conveyor, and that will give me define the left side of the conveyor as my working plane. So let's come back up here. I'm going to zoom out so I can get in on that corner a little bit more. And again, sometimes it's easier if I go back to the 2D wireframe view. Okay, so there you see the conveyor and a wireframe view to our specified dimension. So the next step will be to put rollers on top of it. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I've got my object snap turned on here, because I want to put a roller right on that upper left corner. So I'll come down here to the snap mode and snap settings and make sure I've got object snap on. Okay, something like that looks good. And we'll leave leave the midpoint on. Actually, it picks center, so I don't need the midpoint for this guy. Okay, so I'm going to shut that off. Sometimes these, you have multiple things checked here, it can result in ambiguous selections. So I'll shut that off. Okay, so now let's come in here, and I'm going to zoom in this upper corner. I want to draw on this plane, so I got to use my XY. I got to set up a user coordinate system to define that as the edge of this is XY plane. So I'll go new USC. I'll come up here in the upper left corner, and now it snaps there just like I said. I've got to come down to the end of this to get the other snap point. Put this in the corner. That looks good. Now I'll come down to the bottom here, define my y-axis, or I could go up either way. So if I want to put it up this way, I'll do it that way. It looks good. Okay, so there's my XY coordinate system, or user-defined coordinate system. I can zoom in on that a bit more here. So I want to blow it up so I can make my circle and get it in the right position. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll get the circle tool. I can now snap on that edge and come out here 2.5 centimeters. And there's my circle. Okay. Now the next thing is to move this into position. So I'm going to type move. I'm going to select the circle. Type return. It goes for the center, and I'm going to move this horizontally to the right. 2.5. Okay. And you can see it doesn't want to move that way because I've got the object snapped on and I can't find anything to snap on. So I'm going to make sure the ortho command is still on it, and I'm going to change my snap settings here. Let's come back to snap settings. And I'm going to turn off object snap. Okay. I'm going to come back and make sure objects that my snap is still on, and it's set for 0.5 centimeter increment, so it should allow me to move it 2.5 centimeters. Let's click OK. I'll try this again. Move. And I'll click on the circle until I type return. And now I can click anywhere on the circle. And what's important is that I move in the horizontal direction. I'll type 2.5. And I've moved a circle now 2.5 degrees in the X direction, or 2.5 centimeters in X direction. I'll do it again, move. And I'm going to move it down. Oops, I'm going to make sure I select it first. Return. And I can select any point on the circle. And I'll just move this down. And again, I'm moving in the Y direction. I've got my ortho command set on. So I'll type 2.5 this way. And let's do this again. Move. Select the circle. And I'll click something on the edge. Good. I'll move it down. I'll type 2.5. There we go. Okay. I've got kind of a poor internet connection to the server where I'm running AutoCAD, so sometimes it misses some of my commands, or there's a delay in it and I get ahead of them. Okay, so anyway, there's my circle. I can zoom out on this a little bit now, and I'm going to use the extrude command to kind of push that all the way across. So I'm going to type extrude, and I will select on the circle. I'll type return, and now I'm going to move it from left to right. I'm going to type 75 for the width of the conveyor, and there's my first cylinder that makes up the first roller. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the array command to cover the top of the conveyor with rollers. So to that end, I'll type array, and I will select the roller and type return, and then I will tell it I want a rectangular array, and the default that goes to right away is a array that has 4 columns and 3 rows, and it opens the menu on top so I can easily change those. First thing I'm going to do is tell it I just want 1 row, so I'll type replace 3 with 1, and then I'm going to come over here and tell it I want my rollers 10.5 or 10 centimeters apart. And then I'm going to come up here on top where it says columns, and I'm going to tell it I want 120 because my conveyor's 12 meters long, or 1200 centimeters long. They're 10 centimeters apart. So I'm going to type 120, return, and now I should have, I'll type return to tell it I'm done. And now you can see my conveyor with all the rollers on top in the wireframe view. And I will come back here and go to conceptual view. And now you see the conveyor with the rollers on top, or maybe we'll go to realistic view and see how that looks. Yeah, it looks even better. And let's, oh, one thing now, we still got this in the corner of the bench, so let's go back to our I'm sorry, in the corner of our drawings, we got to center it in the shop building. So let's go back and go to world coordinate system. And one thing I'm going to do here, because I've got quite a few pieces here between the array and the edges of the bench, so I'm going to just circle everything here, and I'm going to type the command group, which is going to keep everything locked together for me now in a nice tidy bundle. I won't have any risk of kind of getting pulling things apart when I move. Okay, so let's open our shop and our layers palette, and let's make our shop visible. Okay, so you can see there's the and I'm going to keep the conveyor layer active because I want to reposition it. But you can see that I need to move the conveyor so it's centered in the shop space. So I can do that just by using my move command again. So I'm going to go move. And now I'm going to, oops, before I do that, I hit escape and get out of that. And let's go back and turn on our object snap again. So I'll go back to snap settings. Object snap, and turn that on, and I'm also going to turn on my midpoint function there because that's going to come in handy here, as you'll see in a second. Okay, now we'll try move. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to select the conveyor. I'll type return to tell it I'm done. It wants me to select a base point. Let me zoom in on this a little bit so I can see the end of it, and I'm going to come down here and find the center point, and then I'm going to come over here and find the center point of the wall, the inner wall. It tells me I'm in the midpoint and shows me a little nice green triangle. So now I've got it centered this direction. So let's zoom out a little bit, and again here it might be easier if I go to a wireframe view for this next step, because I'm going to move it and center it in the other direction. So what I can do is I'll type move, select the conveyor again, and this time I'm going to select a, let's see, type return again until I'm done selecting. I'm going to look for the midpoint of the edge, and then I'm going to move it. Oops. I think I got out of sequence there, so let me undo that. Escape. Let's go move. Select the conveyor again. And I'm going to come down here and make sure I get the specified base point. Come along the edge of the conveyor. And let's see, make sure I'm getting the edge of the conveyor and not something an object on the building. That looks like the edge of the conveyor, or the center midpoint. And now I'm going to move this. Oh, I've got the ortho command on. That's part of my problem. So let's shut the ortho command off. Okay, now I should be able to come over here and line this up with the center of the building, and then come back here and kind of infer the center here. Return. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, okay, so that looks like I got it pretty close to the center. That's fine. Okay. So now I've got my, I can come back here and look at this in ISO view. So now I've got my shop, and I've got my conveyor. So the next step will be to actually use the insert command and import the benches and workers from the previous example. So I'm going to stop here, and then we'll restart this with the final part of this exercise.